Earl Apollonius had sent his hunter Hrolf into the Ungara forest to hunt for animals. He had a few knights with him, as was his habit. And when Apollonius' knights came into the forest, they found no game. They came to a place where they found many animals dead, and they came to a large track where man had been riding. Hrolf rode through the forest and looked for the man. He rode into a clearing and saw in front of him many men and many dogs. Hrolf was such a valiant man that he would rather lose his life than to come back to his lord and not be able to say who had done him this damage and dishonor of hunting animals in his forest without his permission. He rode boldly into the forest and met there King Salomon of Frankland. Hrolf spoke and asked why King Salomon had come there, and King Salomon said that he wanted to avenge the dishonor that Earl Apollonius and his brother Earl Iron had done him by riding in his forest and killing many animals, including some that had been protected from the king himself and from his men. And these included his bison. So Hrolf spoke. "Would you dare to wait if I ride home and tell this to Earl Apollonius?" And King Salomon answered, "We do not wish to await Earl Apollonius in the Waldslang forest, because he has killed our animals there. We do not wish to wait for him here either. You can take him this news, that King Salomon of France has avenged himself for the devastation Earl Apollonius had done in his forest, but that he has not avenged the other things he had done." And King Salomon had his horse brought and rode back into his kingdom. He had done much damage and devastation by killing animals and burning wide areas of the forest. Hrolf rode home and told Earl Apollonius what he had found out. He told him that his forest had been emptied of game, and it had been done by King Salomon of Frankland, and that he had met the king himself in the forest. He also told him the words the king had spoken to him. Earl Apollonius now sent word to Earl Iron, his brother. He had him told what King Salomon had done. And when Earl Iron heard that, he became very angry and called Nordian, his hunter, to him and bade him take all of his dogs, and that the two of them would now leave, and that they would be gone from home 2 months. Isolde became very unhappy and wept bitterly. She put her arms around Earl Iron's neck and said, "My dear lord, don't ride out as you said you would. Remain home and have good entertainment in your bed with me. Don't ride out on your animal hunt, because ill will come of it for you, and thus for me, if you will not let this pass." And the earl answered, "I cannot let this pass anymore. I must go out and hunt animals." And his daughter Isolde, who was 12 years old, said, "Sir, it will turn out ill on this hunt if you go. If you won't grant my mother this boon, that you remain home from this trip, then cannot you grant it to me?" And Earl Iron spoke, "You shall not ask me not ride out to fulfill my solemn vow. Get up now, you knights who are going with me, and prepare yourselves. I shall not let women prevent me." Isolde, his daughter, spoke. "You are competing in hunting with King Salomon. You know that he is a more powerful man than you. And if you do not know that, then you will have proof before your dealings are ended." Earl Iron rode away from Brandinaborg with many knights and all of his hunting dogs. He rode to Tira to meet his brother. And when he arrived in Tira, Earl Apollonius was sick, and he was not able to ride with him. However, Earl Iron was unwilling to wait for him, and he took along as many knights as he wished. And Earl Iron now rode into the forest with 16 knights. And he rode his way, and did not stop until he arrived in the Waldslang forest. And when he arrived there, he began to hunt animals. And wherever he found an animal's track, he went after it, so that no animal survived that was before him, wherever they came in the forest. One day, Earl Iron rode into the forest with his dogs. He found a track, which must have been made by the great Bison. And he followed the track with many dogs. He rode vigorously, and the dogs chased the Bison. They were so fast that they soon caught up with him. The Bison turned against the dogs. The dogs tried to catch him, and the hunter Nordian was the first one behind the dogs of all the knights, and he had 2 of the Earl's best dogs on leash, Stutt and Stappi. And a little later, Earl Iron arrived, and he had Bracca and Porza on a leash. And the last one was the Earl's steward, and the bitches Ruska and Luska were with him, which had borne the Earl's best dogs, and both of them were the best of hunting dogs. Earl Iron spoke to the steward. "Turn your dogs, Bracca and Porza, loose, and let them at the animal." And they did so. The dogs ran fiercely at the animal from both sides. And the Bison turned its head toward the right and pierced Bracca under the shoulder, so that it ran through him, and then it cast him away. And now it turned to the left to Porza, and pierced him through his side, so that he fell dead from his horn. And the Earl called out that the steward should turn the bitches Luska and Ruska loose. This he did, and the dogs ran straight at the animal. Now 2 of the best dogs ever born were already dead. They ran both at him at the same time. Luska ran under the animal and bit into the stomach so hard that the animal flinched. And the animal then jumped with both back feet onto Luska's back, so that it broke and she died. It turned its head at Ruska, so that she was killed. And Nordian now freed Stutt and Stappi, the best of all the dogs. And Stappi leapt at the animal's neck so hard that he came between the animal's horns. He bit in there so fast, but the animal shook him with his head, and then the animal tossed him up into the air so far that, when he hit the ground, every one of his bones was broken. Stutt now tried to jump onto the animal's neck, but the animal turned his head and threw him to the earth, so that she went down dead. The animal ran away and became afraid of the dogs, and Earl Iron turned loose his dogs Paron and Bonikt, and the animal ran away, and the dogs gave chase. There was one knight with the Earl, named Vandilmar. He was big and strong, but he was the least bold of men. He was very much afraid of the animal, and as soon as he saw it, he ran away. And he saw that it might be able to catch him, and he leapt from his horse and climbed a tree. And the animal ran after him under the tree. And he became twice as afraid as before, and he fled up to the branches on the tree. And the branches could not hold him, and he fell down. The animal was down below, and he had turned to meet the dogs. The knight fell down and landed between the animal's horns, and he had one leg on each side of the neck. He held fast to the horns of the animal, and the animal became very frightened, and it ran away, with the dogs after it. The Earl and his men ran after the dogs, and they went a long way now. The Earl spoke to his best huntsman Nordian. "I see where the animal is running, and I see a great wonder. There is a man on the animal's neck." Nordian could now see what the Earl saw, and the Earl called out loudly, "Let us chase the animal, because it will now tire. One of our men has gotten onto the animal." Now Nordian and every knight rode as hard as the horses could run. The animal ran as fast as he could, with the man on him. And the youngest bison were now following, and all of the dogs. There was much yelling, barking of the dogs, and whooping by the hunters. The animal ran to the north, over the heath, to Ungara forest. Vandilmar was now very much afraid he would fall off the animal, because the animal was so large that he knew he would die if he fell down. And he also knew that the animal would tire if he could hold on. The animal ran in this fashion until it came to the Ungara forest. And in that forest, it was turned back by the dogs Paron and Bonigt, and the animal slowly tired of shaking its head and neck where the man was sitting. And at this moment, Earl Iron came up with his spear, and he struck at the animal, and the bison fell. Earl Iron spoke to Vandilmar. "You have the reputation of being the most cowardly of men in battle. You have now accomplished a deed so great that no one has been brave or valorous enough in my country to have gained more honor from me than you have with this daring. When we come home, you shall be rewarded for your courage and accomplishments." Nordian and all the knights who had felled the animal rode up. They praised the Earl for the deed he had accomplished, and no one but he knew what actually had happened. They took the animal and butchered it and gave it to the dogs, and were very satisfied. The Earl rode home now with all his men. He had now fulfilled his vow with courage. Life took Vandilmar for a ride that he probably least expected on that day. A third hunt in Waldslang Forest, an earl becoming prisoner, and a cry for help are going to be part of the next episode of the Thidrekssaga. So stay tuned, and thanks for having tuned in today. And be back again next time in the Hall of Sagenheim.